A proposed constitutional amendment to allow mid-decade congressional redistricting passed the legislature, but a judge found the process illegal due to a technicality. The effort aims to redraw maps before the 2026 election in Virginia is now at a stalemate. Here on Stay the Water, we're going to delve into this constitutional amendment passed by the Virginia legislature and find out what happens next and how this is going to affect redistricting and midterm elections in 2026. It's Stay the Water. I'm your host, Eric Claville, and you're joining us for our 2026 General Assembly series as we address redistricting and Virginia's constitutional amendments. Once again, I want to thank you all for joining us, as you always do, as we broadcast from the campus of the Norfolk State University, home of the Spartan Nation, from none other than WNSB Hot 91, the soul of VA. Well, listen, we hope that you all are enjoying your weekend. We know that across the country, it has been a cold snap, starting last week. Uncommonly cold, I would say that. I mean, it's shutting down flights across the country, and not only that, but shutting down cities, and a lot of municipalities aren't used to this type of cold. And I'll tell you one thing, I'm not used to this type of ice and how cold it has been. So we hope that warmer weather will come, but we do go through seasons, just like our life. We go through seasons, and we're just going to hope to weather this storm as we always do. So we want to make sure that you're staying safe. We want to make sure that you are definitely keeping yourself warm, and also check on your neighbors and your family members and make sure that they are good as well. Because at the end of the day, we all do need each other. We are not just a commonwealth. We're not just a country, but we're also a community. The legislature is off to a major start, and we're almost at the crossover where different bills are debated on one side of the House and they cross over to the other. And we're going to talk about crossover and look at some of those major bills. And later on in this month, as we, of course, continue to take a look and delve into the General Assembly. But one thing that has really taken off and has the eyes of the country up on Virginia, and that is redistricting. I'm calling this, and I've coined this here on this show, and of course, any commentary I do on television, as the redistricting arms race. Now, we know that this was started by the president and the White House initiative in order to help to gain more or protect seats in the House for Republicans. Once again, the president pushed conservative states to do so, and we have had several that have engaged in this and also have changed congressional lines. More specifically, the state of Texas, Missouri did it, where they both states targeted Virginia, well, not Virginia, but congressional black caucus seats, or what's called minority seats, and actually, crossed them out. So with that, we find where representation has been diluted midterm. Now, the significance about this is that we usually redraw congressional lines across the country at the end of every 10 years. And we do that because that is where we take the U.S. Census. However, because there is a very good chance that Republicans will lose the majority in the House, and if they do so, that will definitely impact their chances of passing any legislation from the White House because the Democrats will be in control. In addition to that, it's very possible that they also will the Republicans lose power, the majority in the Senate. And if that happens, that shows that now you have a Congress that is not in line with the White House policies. So then you have another check. Well, you have a check that will actually come into effect, which many are hoping will bring balance back into government. Because right now, the Republicans, or the MAGA side of the Republican Party, tend to have a major majority in what's happening, what's being dictated here. So, when we take a look at what's happening, that is a major issue that are on the minds of the voters, and the voters are paying attention. And when the voters pay attention, they actually talk with their constitutional right to vote. So with that, when we take a look at what's happening, Virginia is that next state. So Virginia, The Constitution was a constitutional amendment itself was actually approved by the House and the Senate for voters' consideration. According to Virginia Public Media, VPM, subsidiary of NPR, part of NPR and also PBS, the whole Virginia General Assembly approved not just one but four constitutional amendments. We talked about these earlier, but I'll just for a refresher, they approved four constitutional amendments: one on abortion and reproductive health care, the automatic restoration of voting rights, marriage equality, and mid-decade redistricting after the state Senate voted for it. Now, what does that mean? That means that there are 3 out of 4 that will go to the voters. Well, first of all 4 will go to the voters to be voted on at your election in November. Now, with that, in November, we will be voting for every U.S. congressperson seat and 1/3 of the Senate. Now, here this year, we do have one U.S. senator on the ballot, and that's Senator Mark Warner. So he is up for another 6-year term, but every congressional member is up for a 2-year term. Now, let's take a look at what's happening here. When we take a look at these constitutional amendments, abortion and reproductive health care, automatic restoration of voting rights, and marriage equality will be on the November ballot. So when you go vote for your congressman, congresswoman, congressperson, you go vote for the U.S. senator that you want to represent you. You will also see these 3 constitutional amendments on the ballot. And what will happen is that you'll vote for these 3 whether you want to change or have them implemented in the Virginia Constitution. And then majority rules. All you need is 50 plus 1 vote, and it's there, right? However, there's one that will not be on November's ballot, but it will be rather on April's ballot. Now, you'll actually have, and then of course you have a primary in June, and with the primary, you'll vote for who will run in the party, and then from there you'll have a November election. So it's going to be very fast. However, this particular one, which is redistricting, mid-decade redistricting, will be on the April ballot for voters as a special election for voters to actually vote on it. Now, what does this do? According to VPM, this amendment gives the ability for Virginia lawmakers to bypass the state's current redistricting practice, where a bipartisan independent commission redraw maps after a decennial census or a decade if other states gerrymander in mid-decade. Now, again, there's a narrow exception here. Other states have to gerrymander. If other states do not gerrymander, and there are some right now this is held up in courts in several states, then that means that this will go into effect. But if states don't gerrymander, that means that the legislature will not redraw the maps. So when you look at voting on this, the special ballot referendum on mid-decade redistricting, that will now show where various congressional districts will lie. Now, let's take a look at this. When we talk about congressional districts, right now we're 6-5 Democrat. You would then have up to 10-1, 10 congressional seats that are majority or very competitive Democrat, and only one towards Southwest Virginia that will be Republican. Now, when you look at the debate over mid-decade redistricting, this, it's been very condensed. Virginia Democrats only introduced the draft in October. Once again, after Republican President Donald Trump, our president, set off a string of partisan gerrymandering nationwide when he pressured Texas lawmakers to give Republicans an edge in the state's congressional districts. Now, I just want to just go over that again one more time. Now, the president pressured state legislators, what happened to states' rights, right, to actually give the Republicans a majority, an edge in congressional seats in Texas. So, we were always taught about, playing within the rules, right? And when you play within the rules, it works because, everyone's playing by the same set of parameters. However, when powers to be are losing by the rules that were set by powers to be, guess what? They change the rules. And this is exactly what this is, the changing of the rules in order to, as the president stated, to give Republicans an edge in the state's congressional districts. We could talk days about this and even probably longer about what precedent are you setting for our kids. What precedents are you setting for the rest of the world? When you say, hey, you know what, we're losing. Let's change the rules so we can start winning again. Again, that's another conversation, but it's worth, talking about. It's worth stating, because now what ends up happening is that, you're getting a system that is pretty much rigged in favor of the powers to be. But that's where it stands. However, there's been movement since last week. And where's this movement? So a Virginia court, according to Virginia Mercury, struck down the redistricting amendment headed for April ballot. According to the Virginia Mercury, Tazewell County judge ruled that the General Assembly violated constitutional requirements and its own rules in advancing mid-decade redistricting proposals. According to the article, it shows that some believe that this is a major setback to Democrats' legislative leaders who say the change is needed to respond to partisan gerrymandering in some Republican-led states and hope to put the measure before the voters in April referendum. Digging a little deeper, it's a 22-page ruling. I advise you to, if you have time, to go back and read it. But a 22-page ruling issued by Tazewell County Circuit Court Judge Jack C. Hurley. And in that, he found that the legislature acted unlawfully when it approved the redistricting amendment during a special legislative session during November 4th election. Now, he concluded that lawmakers exceeded the scope of that session, violated their own procedural rules, and failed to comply with constitutional and statutory requirements governing amendments to the Virginia Constitution. So, as a result of this, the court declared, under this judge, the process void ab initio, which means, it's a Latin word, but it means it's legally invalid from the outset. So even though that the General Assembly met, they actually met during a special session. And during this time period, actually it was a special session because the speaker actually kept sessioning going in order for this to be a part, or this may be something that they had to do. And what ended up happening, they voted for this the first time. Because here's the reason why this matters. You have to vote in Virginia for a constitutional amendment twice and get majority vote twice in the legislature before it goes to the voters. So you see how that process is very deliberate? There's a check. There's nothing that just happens all of a sudden. And I know we're in an era where we have a president and we're also living in social media. We live in a microwave society where we got to do this, and that, right? But it's not true. We don't have to do it all fast. Being deliberate is actually, and being patient is actually a virtue. Well, patience is a virtue. We know that by scripture. Being deliberate brings wisdom because what you are able to do is sit down, take the emotions out, take the bias out, and really look at this across the board and really make a more informed decision. And that's what we do on this show. We break things down, bring it to you. I know you hear all the noise during the week and you're trying to, get home and cook dinner, get up on time, get to work, make the meeting, have time with the children. Listen, I do it as well. We all do. But on this show, we take a moment, we go through the research, we look at that issue, and we needle down into the very important parts, the salient points, so that you could be more well-informed and say, you know what? I agree with my original thought, or I changed my thought about this. And that's why our process for constitutional amendments, I believe, is very good, because it allows us an opportunity to get it right or get it better than before. So here's what here's where we stand. So therefore, the Republicans filed, and the court found that this was the case. Now, so even though it blocks it, the Democrats had planned to ask voters. They blocked the vote on April 21st, or planning to April 21st, whether the General Assembly should be allowed under limited circumstances to redraw a congressional legislative district between censuses. Now, that was the plan. Instead, according to the Virginia Mercury, the court ruled that the amendment was improperly adopted and cannot advance to the ballot as scheduled. So the judge He went a step further. He also barred state election officials from taking further steps to submit the measure to voters unless and until constitutional requirements are met. And we find here that Democratic leaders said they intend to appeal the decision, which they argue improperly blocks voters from weighing in on proposals. It's Stay the Water. I'm your host, Eric LaVille, and you're listening to our 2026 General Assembly series, where we're discussing what I've coined the redistricting arms race. In this particular session of the show, this series, we're kneeling down and looking at the most salient points of this argument thus far as it relates to redistricting mid-decade. That's right. Every decade, at the end of every decade, what we do is that we go and get the census, see where people have moved, see where individuals are born, and we create districts. We create all types of districts, congressional districts. We also create state districts. We create city districts for all of our offices on this census. Also, the census is used for businesses, and they can tell you it tells them where to put commerce and businesses and so forth and so on. However, this is mid-decade. This is 2026, 25, 26. This is not 2030. So what we're doing now, we're taking a look into determining why is this the case, where is it now, and where is this leading us to. So with this, we find where there are the court cites timing, notice failures on the state constitution as well. As a matter of fact, the ruling also focused on these areas. Under the Virginia Constitution, proposed amendments must be approved by two separately elected General Assemblies, which they've done, with an intervening general election of the House of Delegates. Now, here's what the court found. The court found that the amendment was improperly advanced during the 2024 special session, and that actions taken during the 2026 regular session could not retroactively cure those defects or satisfy the next ensuing general election requirement set out in the Constitution. That's a very interesting argument. But in addition to that, according to Virginia Mercury, the court held the state officials failed to comply with the Virginia statute requiring public posting of proposed constitutional amendments at courthouses and other public occasions at least 3 months before the next election. Now, because that posting did not occur, the court said officials are prohibited from submitting the amendment to voters. So when you look at all this together, you're going to find the court concluded that, quote, this is from the decision, quote, any and all matters, motions, actions, or votes regarding House Joint Resolution 6007, unquote, violated the General Assembly's own rules and were, therefore, illegal. All right, so that's kind of where that is. Now, let's look at both sides and kind of see what they said on this, right? So let's look at the Republican side. So the Republican side, and of course the allies, called this a victory. There were advocacy groups that held this decision as not just a victory, but a rebuke of what they described as partisan in-run around constitutional safeguards. Now, mind you, they didn't say this about any other states, nor did they say this about the Republican president asking other states to intervene. So, are we being fair here? But they're focusing on Virginia, so we're going to focus this on Virginia. But in a joint statement, General Assembly member McDougal and former U.S. House Speaker Eric Cantor, who is the honorary co-chair of Virginians for Fair Maps, said the ruling vindicated their argument that Democrats ignore clear legal limits. Now, he also said today's ruling is a decisive victory for the rule of law and Virginia voters. Now, he also said that the court confirmed that Democratic legislative leaders unlawfully expanded a special session. They violated their own rules, attempted to force through redistricting, constitutional amendment, while Virginians already voted. Now, the judge also added, quote, rightly declared those actions void from the start. This is what they stated. And, quote, if they continue to move forward with their unconstitutional amendment process, the Democrats will be defying the order of the court, unquote. Well, it's, again, interesting because their president ignores and defies court orders all the time. He also stated that the In this statement, they emphasized the Republican or GOP's position that the case was, quote, never about partisanship, unquote, but rather about process and constitutional compliance. It actually was about partisanship and keeping the congressional lines as they are, but they just simply found the reasoning around a legal reasoning for constitutional compliance and process. But the court also, he said, according to McDougall and Cantor, made clear that elections matter, notice matters, and the rules apply to everyone, even those in power. Interesting. So the Republicans are telling the Democrats to follow the court order, follow the rules, the procedures, and so forth. Okay. Now, the Democrats, they're going to blast the ruling itself, and they said that they sharply criticized the ruling, signaled they would fight it. Of course, House Speaker Don Scott, Democrat out of Portsmouth, called the lawmakers back to Richmond for a special session in October, accused Republicans of using the courts to block a policy they could not defeat politically, and said the General Assembly would appeal immediately, which they have. Now, he said, according to Speaker Scott, he said, nothing that happened today will dissuade us from continuing to move forward and put this matter directly before the voters. He also said Republicans who can't win at the ballot box are abusing the legal process in an attempt to sow confusion and block Virginians from voting. Speaker Scott called the lawsuit court shopping, in plain and simple. Speaker Scott is also a very good trial lawyer as well. He said Democrats are prepared for the next step. Voters, not politicians, will have the final say. So Judge Hurley was appointed to the court by former Governor Bob McDonnell, who is a Republican. It also noted that advocacy groups, along with Democrats, they also echoed that same message, framing the ruling as a temporary obstacle rather than a final outcome. Now, Karen Charles Dungo, who is campaign manager for Virginians for Fair Elections, and she said that she expected the decision to be appealed and warned that the ruling could mislead voters. But she stated that this is a clear attempt to confuse voters, block them from having a say, and Republicans court shop for a ruling because litigation and misinformation are the only tools they have left. But she also talked about how proud she was, how prepared, that they're prepared for what comes next, and Virginians deserve both the right to vote and the chance to lead the playing field. With that, we find where, when you look at misinformation, right here in Virginia Beach, we found where the rejoin, or actually not the rejoin, but the actual, the way we vote, the 10-1 system or the 7-3-1 system. I mean, it was so confusing to people. When I did analysis on it, I actually go back and study it over and over again to make sure that I'm getting the nuances correct so I don't confuse you, the listener. I mean, so misinformation is a very powerful tool that does a disservice to everyone. So that's why it's very important that we get it right. Very important that we get it right so that, again, just give you the facts and the history and let you make the decision moving forward. So when they talked about, now that was an article that the research that I did on this particular issue after the amendment was passed. Also, what the Republicans did when they got the court ruling, and now all this happened this week, by the way. Last week, and now the Democrats, they actually filed the appeal. So they appealed the judge's order halting redistricting. So it was filed. Of course, we know on Tuesday, Judge Hurley sided with the GOP-backed plaintiffs and granted their motion for preliminary and permanent injunction, ruling that the General Assembly's October 31st, 2025 vote to amend the state constitution was null and void. Well, again, as promised, Democratic leadership in the General Assembly, they quickly appealed it. So they actually appealed it this week as well. So they appealed it on Friday. And in appealing that, they said they followed through on their commitment to appeal the Tazewell ruling. This decision was legally flawed, unprecedented, and a product of court shopping, designed to block Virginians from voting on their own constitution. Now, of course, Judge Hurley ruled that the special session, which was left open by then Governor Glenn Youngkin in May 2024, was originally called to address the state's budget, and anything beyond the scope could only be introduced by unanimous consent of the legislators. However, The judge also took issue with the legislature voting on the bill. Early voting began for the 2025 state legislative elections. He said the Constitution requires an intervening election following the first passage of Constitution Amendment. But Democrats, they sought to bring a proposed congressional amendment before Virginia voters to allow the redrawing. So here's where we are, right? If successfully appealed, Virginia Democrats plan to send a proposed amendment to voters in April. And the State Court of Appeals has taken it, they're going to take the case up because it has been filed. So that's where we are. They filed the appeal. First you got the decision, and they filed the appeal. And that's where it is. So there's, again, a lot of moving parts here. A lot of things that's happening that are impacting you. So here in, let's just say, the city of Norfolk, on the peninsula, Hampton, Newport News, your congressional member is Congressman Bobby Scott. If you're in Virginia Beach, your congressional member is Congresswoman Jen Kiggins. And it wraps all around from Virginia Beach, going up a little bit to the Eastern Shore, then all the way around a little bit around the Chesapeake area. If you live out in Gloucester, York County, all of that. Rob Whitman, he is your congressional delegate. That could change. Well, first of all, we already know District 1 and 2, the Republican here in Hampton Roads, is going to change, hands down. But I can tell you this, the way things are going, that district, we know former Congresswoman Lane Laura has thrown her hat in to run for that seat, which she held right now 2 terms ago, which she lost to Jen Kiggins. But the way things are going, that is the most challenged seat in Virginia Beach, that center of that particular seat. And the way things are going now, the policies of the White House and how voters, and especially military veterans and so forth, are looking at the White House policy, the GOP-backed policies and the GOP-passed policies in Congress, they don't agree with what's happening. And that seat could flip without even redistricting. So there's a lot of competition there based upon policies. But where are we now? We're now with the legislature passing the amendment. It was then stopped or halted by the by the Republicans, by a judge out of Tazewell County. And now an appeal was filed by the Democrats. Now, these 2 last things happened last week. But we're going to see what happens with the appellate court, how they take it up. Will this go to the state Supreme Court if they lose? Absolutely. I believe it's going to be appealed by the losing party. And we'll see what happens after that. But once again, we're monitoring for you. We're bringing it to you because here on State of the Water, we bring movers, shakers, and policymakers to you to discuss issues important to the community. And during this season of the 2026 General Assembly, join us every week as we bring you up-to-date things that are happening and moving, that are reshaping your Commonwealth, your city, your community, because this is your country. Until next time, be good, be great. God bless, and we'll see you next week.
Hi, I'm Carrie Washington, and you're listening to State of the Water with award-winning host Dr. Eric Clavel.